Hello and welcome back to the Apprentice One-to-One podcast. This is an episode all about the changes to the EAS qualifications guide, which has caused a few people some issues and stresses over the last few weeks. And we've done a podcast on the Electricians podcast, myself and Sam, discussing this. And there's been some conversations building over on Twitter with people who've been affected by this. And I think fundamentally, it's falling back to a miscommunication of training providers and a misunderstanding amongst them and electricians as to what all of this actually means. So we're going to go into it. We're going to look at the actual document and explain what it means and what it's saying and how that could impact you when you are going through training to maintain your qualifications, and also if you're looking to register with a CPS provider. So we'll dive into the document now, and you can see it's called the Electrotechnical Assessment Specification, EAS for short. We love an acronym, don't we? And this one is the qualifications guide, and it was updated in June 2025, so not that long ago. We're recording in October 2025 here, and there is sort of an introduction, an explanation of what this means and how it ties in with ECS card holders. But we're going to go into the core intent of what this is saying. So the overview of applicable mandatory technical competence requirements by work category. So the work category is an important part because they do separate this out into dwellings, domestic environments, and like full scope, as we term it, of the past. So that they're breaking that down there. We've got dwellings and then other than dwellings, electric vehicle charging equipment, solar voltaic, electrical energy storage systems, and micro wind turbines. And I should say right at the start of this, we've been asking for a long time in industry to have a base camping qualifications of what it means to be an electrician. And we've now got that. That is something that I think is good and I support fully, because of the past we've had these short entry routes that training providers pushed forward to maximize revenue for themselves more than anything else. And we've ended up with different qualifications amongst different groups of people. And now we've got this kind of line in the sand of this is what it actually takes to work in this sector and be with a CPS provider. I think fundamentally is a good idea and a good move, and something that I and others have all called for quite a long time now. So I'm not going to knock that. I just think there's been a bit of a communications problem around this amongst training providers and more widely out into industry, and it's causing some stress and worry that is completely unnecessary, and that is something that should be looked at. And also, when things like this happen, there's always people who fall the wrong side of that line. And I don't think we've got enough of a safety net to look after those people and give them the best guidance and support to work through what they actually need to be doing. Or it certainly doesn't look that way anyway from the conversations I've been having from some of those in those circumstances. Anyway, we'll come back to that later on. I just wanted to say that right early doors on the podcast. So we've got the underpinning core technical competence for your limited dwellings. So this is if you're working in people's homes. Your recognised qualifications, you've got your level 3 apprenticeship, your endpoint assessment, typical apprenticeship, AM2 portfolio, all that kind of stuff. Historical industry approved apprenticeship or recognised qualifications. And that is a really important one. So that's in there for your dwellings only. You've got your experienced worker assessment, and then you have got your level 3 certificate in installing, testing, and ensuring compliance of electrical installations in dwellings. And there is a little note on there that says that's accepted until the 1st of January 2026. And if you read the little star point underneath, it says Route 4 will no longer be acceptable for new entrants who are applying to join a CPS provider. Individuals who've got this qualification prior to the date will be eligible to apply via Route 2, the older qualification. So if you've done it already, they are not saying that you can't use that. They're just saying we're not going to accept it for people coming into industry now, which I think is an important point to note, because I think that's one of the breakdown areas that some training providers are failing to follow through with people who are coming to them for additional training, because we've got the training providers have now got a check your qualifications before allowing you to take these level 3 courses. We'll come back to that later. So again, if you're looking for sort of full scope, you need to have your level 3, same as before, historical qualifications or an experienced worker assessment. There is no option 4 on that list already. Other qualifications that you're going to need, and again, it depends to which sector you're working in. So micro wind turbines, for example, isn't a prerequisite of everybody's membership to a CPS provider. It's just if you're going into those areas. Same if you're working in solar PV, battery storage, EV charging, you're going to need those top-up qualifications to be able to deliver them through your membership. So you can see here we've got another one which is limited to the dwellings that lists the qualifications for the level 3 apprenticeship. So you've got your, for example, 5357, which is probably the one most people are doing. There's equivalents from EAL and up in Scotland, and some specific qualifications for people who've been in the military and such as well. So they're in there. And then there's a note at the bottom about Route 2 for all the quals, and it's in table 4.8 on page 10. So we'll come to that in a minute. So you've got the experienced worker route. It explains what that is. It's people who've been working in industry for a while, but maybe haven't got a full range of qualifications. You can go through a skills scan, complete your work-based portfolio, fill in any gaps with courses that you need, and through the experienced worker process of doing your AM2 and such, reach the same level of qualification as required as if you were fresh to industry, basically. It's a way of plugging the gaps in some of your training. So Route 3 for your current qualifications. This again, for dwellings, it's showing the specific experienced worker assessment that we'll accept for EAL and city and guilds. And then there's the older qualification, which is the former JIB mature candidate assessment process. And again, it lists those in there. So we've then got the level 3 certificate for installing, testing, insurance compliance of your electrical installations. So this is from the 1st of January, this route will no longer be accepted, but if you've done these qualifications before, you will still be able to use them. And you can see which ones those are. So it's an LCL one, City and Guilds, an EAL, and an older qualification again from City and Guilds and EAL. So they're actually listed. It's telling you what those are. So if you've got those, you can still use them. So as we move on to the most important areas of all for those of you who have got some aged qualifications, you can see in this first page on page 9, we've got the level 3 electrotechnical apprenticeship or equivalent. So this is, again, looking at the typical qualifications you'd do today. And again, it's 5357, AL equivalent. Moving on to the next page is some of the historical ones that are considered to be the same as that, but of a prior point in time. So you can see, again, for your level 3, we've got the City and Guilds 2356, which I know loads of people did. I believe that had the AM2 incorporated into its training model rather than a separate assessment. Don't quote me on that, but I think it did. And then you can see here the other list of qualifications, and some of those that are jumping out at me because I've had conversations with people who've done these quals and been told that they can't get on to do their solar course or their EV course because they don't have an MVQ level 3. You can see on here it says level 3 certificate in electrical installation work C course. That was a really popular course back in the day, and that's on that list as an older qualification that's considered equivalent. So you can join your CPS provider. You should be able to enroll and do these courses, and I think that's an important point that needs stressing. And again, you can see there is electrical installation course A or B certificates. So they're all in there. If your qualifications happen not to be on that list, I think there is still a conversation to be had that needs a bit of flexibility around it if you've been in industry a long time. My view is that this approach is trying to capture a lot of people who have come into the sector through the short course domestic installer routes and maybe haven't had the training that would have best served them at the time they entered, trying to collect those people together and direct them towards it. And by the way, I think there's a massive argument about who should be funding that, having had industry say that was okay and you can come into the sector and effectively work through a CPS provider. It shouldn't all just fall back onto those people who've used what was a legitimate route at the time. Whatever we think about that, I don't feel that that's fair. And I know, for example, the NIC, if you're a member of them, they do have a mechanism internal to their membership where you can have support to pay for the experienced worker assessment. I know from chatting to Paul Collins that that's actually a thing. And I think that's really important that there is financial help for those people, so we're not ejecting them from industry. My worry is a lot of people will just walk away. We've got a big pool there that with a little bit of upskilling, we can raise those standards. I think that's the important thing we're trying to do here. And the focus should be on having a higher line in the sand of what the qualifications and the resulting work out in industry looks like. Because we can sit here and debate all these quals till the death of time, but if the changes in this don't result in higher standards, then it's all pointless anyway. If it's just the process of having people pay to go through training and get more cards and qualifications, but the work that's been carried out in the actual real world doesn't move the dial, it's pointless. So we have to ensure that if we're saying the quality isn't good enough, and I'm assuming based on these changes that are coming, it is an acceptance of industry that they realise it isn't, then we have to have that process which allows for that improvement and support those people on that journey, not punish them, I think anyway. You see there is a little note at the bottom of there in the starred segment saying formal training programs prior to 1994 will probably have followed an apprenticeship program. If this is the case, the final apprenticeship completion certificate, deeds or diploma can be provided in lieu of the FICA, AM1 or AM2. Applicants may also present more recent apprenticeship completion certificates from various issuing authorities without evidence of the underpinning technical qualifications or endpoint assessment certification. In these circumstances, the certification or registration body must present each individual applicant details to TESP, the Electrotechnical Skills Partnership, for verification against historical records. A formal decision notice will then be issued. Pre-1995, AM2 was issued in Scotland. In the summer of 1995, it was FICA. So they're actually detailing there that there is a discussion that can be had around some of these older quals. It's not just black and white, which I think is a really important thing to emphasise. So we've got all the qualifications continued. So there is either no longer available to new learners or no longer awarded. And again, you can see what those are. There's some City and Guild ones on there. And again, they've got the note at the bottom, the same as up there. So again, going into the experienced worker assessment. So this is for your core technical competence for all electrotechnical work. It's detailing that as well. The wiring regs course that you need to take. So they're actually saying what those are. You've got your City and Guilds, EAL, LCL, BPEC, SQA, all listed in there to say what they expect that qualification to be. And I think that's really important because there's lots of courses that's offered out there which don't maybe satisfy what is needed. And there's lots of people who've paid, for example, to go on an EV charging course that turns out want what was needed, and they're having to do it again. So there is issues such as that taking place out in industry. So we've got initial verification, 2391 or equivalent, depending on the awarding organisation. You've then got current qualifications. So this is the difference here. So you've got your current quals, and then you've got your older quals. So there is predated quals to that. Either they're no longer available to new learners or no longer awarded. So you've got your 2397s, 2394. There was a window in time where 2391 stopped and it went 9495. It then came back 91 with some extra numbers on the end. We love to mess about with our qualifications. I have no idea why we do that, but we do. So they are acknowledging that those aged ones do count for that. Again, your electric vehicle charge point one. So we've got the current quals, your City and Guilds 292131, 29234, EAL equivalents. That's for dwellings only, and then there's some different ones for all electrotechnical work. Current quals for the solar, so you've got your BPEC, City and Guilds, EAL and LCL. Older quals again, there was a City and Guilds course specific for that. Battery storage, the same, no older qual on that one, I don't believe. And then you've got your micro wind turbine, which isn't actually showing as a qualification available at the minute, so there must be something on the way. Now, this section lists technical knowledge qualifications that are commonly presented by applicants but are insufficient to demonstrate full occupational competence as an electrician. So these are ones that they're saying that if you got this, we don't consider that enough on its own. And the important one, I think, is the 2330, because that was such a big push of industry for people to do that course. And I guess now we've got like the 2365 that's come along in its place as I see it. That's maybe not correct, but yeah, that's how it looks. And, you know, they say here for the reason, the classroom-based technical knowledge qualifications, they are part of what's acceptable, but not the whole thing, basically. So if you've got your 2330, you are going to also need to do your MVQ and AM2 or the experienced worker assessment. And while we've got a lot of people who came into industry via like domestic installer, 5-day, 5-week wonder courses, whatever we want to call them, there are a lot of people who went on full-time study at college, did their 2330s, went out into industry working as improvers or whatever out on site, and never really pushed their quals beyond that. And now employers are having to look at the staff they're sending to do work activities and ensure that they're meeting these standards, because it's not just on the qualified supervisors. This is on people going to do those specific areas of work, and saying that they need them. This is where we're getting the breakdown on mass anyway. These people are then going to try and take, for example, a wiring regs course or an EV course, and they can't get onto it because they don't have the MVQ level 3 or equivalent. So I think that's the big glut of people that have tried to be captured, those through the domestic installer route, or people who've been out on site and not ever finished their training. And there's some others who have got a lot of these age quals. The guys we've been speaking to on Twitter, I think, have got these older quals, but they've approached training providers to get on these courses to do like solar or battery and been told, you can't get on and do it. And I think that's a communication thing. So I don't know if there's work to be done by TESP or whoever to properly explain that to training providers beyond just a document on the internet. Or I don't know. I don't know how they do that. But it does seem to be that is a problem. And then people go off away from that thinking, well, I can't get on my course now. You know, I've tried and I've been told no. And one of them actually tried with their CPS provider to go and do the trainings. This wasn't a small private training company. It was someone you would expect to know. And yeah, then the stress that builds, they're just like, I've been doing this job 20 years. I've got a raft of satisfied customers, a business that we've established locally with a fantastic reputation. One of these guys in solar is someone that I look up to as one of the really good installers. And they're now being told they can't go and do their update course for the PV without having a level 3 MVQ. And, you know, if that is through a miscommunication or it's because the actual rules are what they are, either way, that is a failure of the current system. There is no responsibility of the person on the receiving end of that. So that is something that I think needs to be sorted out. And we kind of went into that on the electricians podcast, because whilst this particular document is related to the qualifications guide for getting into a CPS provider or working within a company that is registered with a CPS provider, it is also in the prerequisite entry qualifications you need to do your wiring regs, to do your EV charging, to do your solar, to do your battery. All of this is creeping in together. So if you're in that position where you've just done your 2330 and you've been happily working in industry all this time, there's every prospect that you are going to have to do your experience worker assessment, your MVQ, your portfolio, and to keep working. You know, that's the situation in that boat. And there's an argument there to say, well, those people would benefit greatly from that training. And I don't fall out with that in some instances. And there's others where those people will be very capable and have worked quite happily in industry for 20 years doing the jobs that they would be doing the day after they finish this updated training in most likely exactly the same way. But I guess that's the difficulty in having this line in the standing qualifications that we've got. People will fall the wrong side of that because of that approach and decision, and it's how that's best managed which will dictate if this is going to be a success or not. Because what we don't want is all those people en masse just leaving the sector. If that's the goal and objective of industry, that is going to massively backfire on us because we're short enough already of skilled workers in the industry, and these people have the fundamental skills to do the job. They're doing it right now, today, whether we like it or not, based on the qualifications they've got. So that is something we need to be really cautious and careful with. And it's very easy to write these rules out in PDFs and share them as a process of the industry wants and dictates without fully understanding how that plays out in the real world and how people feel about that who've been working in those jobs for 20 odd years and more. These are people's livelihoods at the end of the day. And a lot of those people are in that situation, not because they chose to be, but because industry and circumstance led them to that. So the employers led them to that. The industry rules of the time led them to it. It's not a choice that I'm not going to bother finishing my quals because I don't want them. Who's going to make that decision? Nobody. It's just the situation that played out. And to push that all back on the individual, I think is a bit of a liberty with no accountability for what happened prior. And we're kind of dicing around that a little bit, where we've got this standard we want, fully support that. We've got better training and resources coming into industry, fully support that. Incredible efforts have been made to get more funding for training providers. We have got different qualification routes now with the domestic electrician to allow more employers to run apprenticeships. Love that. We have got an experienced worker route where people can update their qualifications who need to, who can re-enter our industry as retrainees through full-time study routes. So things are improving. I just think sometimes we're tarring a lot of these people who haven't got the right qualifications and making them suffer the consequence of that when it wasn't just them who led to them being in that position. I think that's the truthful way of saying it and looking at it. And again, just to reference back to the older qualifications and making training providers fully aware of those and making electricians fully aware of that through communication, through CPS providers, through tests themselves in more places than just PDFs and on their own website, getting it out there on industry news like eFix, Professional Electrician, podcasts like this one and others, into updates that go out through the CPS renewal process, where that is clearly stated to not cause worry and panic among those with older quals. And if you are in that circumstance and you are still worried about that because your quals aren't appearing on that list, to again have a better direction for those people to have the conversation with TESP and get that figured out rather than just panicking. You know, there's a couple of guys on Twitter who are really, really panicked about this because they can't do their solar or EV courses and they don't know what to do. And they're like, oh, well, it's just too much hassle. They clearly aren't ready me. I'll just pack my business in and go do something else. And that's like 20 years of their life down the drain and a good installer gone through a miscommunication, maybe. That's cataclysmically bad. So yeah, that was that. Anyway, I wanted to run through that just so I could put it on the Apprentice One-to-One podcast, clearly set out as I understand it. And if you have a different view on it or a better understanding of it, please do get in touch. I would like to try and get someone from TESP to come on and go through this on our podcast and explain the situation and options to people. And if there is a miscommunication with the training providers, and maybe we can get some of those affected by this to come on and have a chat as well, and share what their actual qualifications are and their experience has been in speaking with a training provider. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Drop your comments and questions in below. Share this out far and wide in the hope it helps other people. I'll link to the podcast I did with Sam. I'll see you all on the next one.